Folks, welcome back to the channel. My name is Matt. I'm an A380 captain out here in the Middle East. If you're new to the channel, this channel is all about aviation. Anything you want to know, I will attempt to answer. If you like aviation, please consider hitting that subscribe button just so we can tell you when our next video is out. We're trying to produce one a week to demystify aviation a little bit. Now, we didn't make a video last week. Surprisingly, given the lockdown period and the lack of flying, I've been pretty busy in the simulator. But this week we're back onto the videos again, and we're trying to answer a question that most passengers pose us when they come to the flight deck. Now, I know you can't come to the flight deck during the cruise anymore, but before takeoff, after landing, people still come up to say hi. And the question they tend to ask more than anything else is, do we know what all the buttons do? Well, of course, the answer to that is obviously yes, we do know what the buttons do. And today we're going to have a quick run around the flight deck just to show you what those buttons do and where they are. So hopefully next time you come to the flight deck, it's a little bit demystified. So, if you're ready, let's get going. So folks, we'll start our tour of the A380 flight deck back here behind the pilot's seats, looking at the main instrument panel. Once we've had a look at the instrument panel and the various screens and knobs and buttons there are there, we'll have a dedicated look at the overhead panel, the systems panel if you like, where all the on-off buttons for the various switches are. Then, once we've completed that, you should be pretty much good to go about identifying the aspects of the A380 and in fact any other Airbus type. So, let's get going. So as we start our look, we look at the screens. We have the OIS, or Onboard Information System, the PFD and ND, the primary flight display and nav display, EWD and SD, engine warning display, systems display, and finally the MFD, the multifunction display. Moving on from there, in the middle of the pedestal, we have the thrust levers, 1, 2, 3 and 4. After the thrust levers, either side of the pilot, the first officer and the captain, we have the side sticks, which control the airplane in manual flight. From the side sticks, we have the two tables. Both tables have an inbuilt keyboard so that the pilots can operate the OIS. The next thing to point out are the rudder pedals. Each pilot has a set of rudder pedals, and above the rudder pedals, or in between the rudder pedals, there is an adjuster to make the rudder pedals suitable for each pilot. Moving on from the rudder pedals, we're looking at the tiller, or the thing that we use to steer the aircraft whilst taxiing on the ground. Again, one on the left and one on the right for the first officer. After the tiller, we move to the landing gear lever. The landing gear lever looks exactly the same on each and every Airbus type. The KCCU is next, the keyboard cursor control unit. This is the main interface between the pilots and the electronic systems of the A380. Engine master switches are next. Basically, this is what turns the fuel on to each engine. Flaps and slats, they have 4 positions, 1, 2, 3 and full. The speed brake lever is located on the left-hand side. The autopilot and the EFIS control panels are on the FCU. This is our main interface when it comes to choosing whether we fly the airplane manually or automatically. The EFIS control panel dictates what we have on the navigation display. After that, we have the 2 radios. In fact, there are 3 radios. You'll see the 3rd radio when we move to the overhead panel. Following on from the radios, we move to the ISIS. This is our standby nav display. We have a standby nav and a standby primary flight display here. The auto brake, BTV and landing gear indicators are in the middle of the flight deck. We have electric seat adjusters, much like you do in the car. It moves the seats forwards, backwards, up or down to make sure the pilot is sat in the right location to fly the airplane. After this, we have a basic compass, just as you would in any light aircraft. Following on from the compass, we have 2 chart holders either side of the pilots, if they have to use paper charts, but generally these days everything is done by electronic charts. So we've completed now the main instrument panel, and we're going to have a look at the overhead panel. We start the overhead panel with the exterior lights. Following on from this, we move on to the wing and engine anti-ice controllers. It is then on to the engine start selector, which we need to turn on before starting the engines. The cabin pressure controller, which controls the pressurization of the aircraft, is our next buttons. Following this, we have a look at the simple windscreen wipers for the aircraft. On the right hand side, we have the manual engine start push buttons if the engines are not working automatically. The cabin call bells to call the cabin crew if required is next. The air conditioning panel, or the bleed air panel, controls how much air comes in and the temperature regulation of both the flight deck and the cabin. The electrical panel controls the 4 generators driven by the engine-driven generator pumps. Fuel panel is next. Fuel panel is quite complicated on the A380, consisting of around about 20 different fuel pumps. The hydraulics panel, situated above, pressurizes the hydraulics 5,500 psi. There are only 2 hydraulic systems. Above that is the fire push buttons, should we have a fire in any of the engines or on the APU. We talked about the third radio when we were looking at the main instrument panel, and here it is. Above the radio is the cockpit voice recorder, or CVR. To the left hand side is the ADIRS panel, or the Air Data Inertial Reference System. It is with this combined with GPS that we get our navigation display from. After that is the prims and secs, or primary and secondary flight control computers, the things that actually control the aircraft. Following on from this, it is fuel jettison and fuel emergency transfer. The fuel jettisons at 2,400 kilograms per minute. After this, we have the ram air turbine. The ram air turbine is a little windmill that drops out of the aircraft in case of a loss of power to provide electrical generation. And finally, at the top, we have computer resets. Most of our circuit breakers are down below, but there are certain systems we can reset from the flight deck. So folks, that pretty much concludes our little tour around the A380 flight deck. As I said earlier, it's pretty much similar to any other Airbus flight deck. Obviously there's 4 of everything on the A380 in terms of engines, and there's more fuel pumps, but ultimately an Airbus is an Airbus. I hope you've enjoyed this video. As I said at the beginning, I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe to us, follow us on Instagram or any other of our social media channels. If there is anything I can do for you, please leave comments below and I will definitely get back to you. Stay safe, enjoy the video, and I'll see you all again very soon. Thanks very much.